What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 and the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 399, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G, we're getting a 6.7-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED Plus display. This phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 392, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. So overall, both phones have great displays, but in a couple ways, the A73 5G has a slight advantage. First of all, at 6.7 inches versus again 6.6 with the Moto G Stylus, the A73 5G is a bit larger, so if you're going to be on your phone a bit more and you tend to consume a bit more content, having a larger display could be a good thing. And in addition to this, with the Super AMOLED Plus display versus a regular IPS LCD, the display technology with the A73 5G is a bit better too. The display is slightly brighter, the colors are a bit richer and more vibrant, and even though it's not really that noticeable in this video, the A73 5G does have better viewing angles. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, the A73 5G will be easier to see. But in general, those differences are a bit more on the subtle side. So overall, if you're looking for a phone that has a really nice display, either phone here will be a great choice. Now for storage, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, on one hand, the common version of this phone you typically find through US carriers will have 128GB of internal storage with micro SD card expansion, but this phone in my hand is actually factory unlocked and it has 256 instead. With the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G, this phone in this video does have 128, but I believe there is another version that has 256. And in addition to this, both phones do support micro SD card expansion. So honestly, I feel like there's not really a main advantage here because on one hand, despite this version of the Moto G Stylus 5G having 256, if you get this phone from a carrier, which I feel like a lot of people who get this phone will, again, you are probably only going to get 128GB. And on the other hand, with the A73 5G, this phone isn't even officially launched in the US, so no matter what, you will be getting it factory unlocked, unless you're outside the US, of course, in which case I'm not really sure what the carrier situation is actually like. But regardless, the most common version of each phone is going to have 128GB. But with either phone, if you really want 256, it is available, so definitely keep this in mind. But all this being said, I feel like for the average user, 128GB is most likely going to be perfectly fine anyway. So if you're looking for a mid-range phone that has plenty of storage for average use, either phone here will be perfectly fine. For security features, both phones have face unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners too. With the Moto G Stylus 5G, it's right here in the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G, it's in the display. So a bit more premium, but in general, the functionality is pretty much the same. But starting with the Moto G Stylus 5G, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. It really just comes down to where you like the placement better. I feel like when it comes to being practical, having it on the power key is just really unbeatable. But at the same time, for me personally, I really do like the premium look and feel of the in-display fingerprint scanner. So again, it really comes down to personal preference, but either way, they both work really well. Now for the camera setups, up front, both phones have real nice looking hole punch designs for the selfie cameras. The Moto G Stylus 5G has 16 megapixels, and with the A73 5G, this one is 32. Then on the back, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we get a dual camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera and an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera. With the A73 5G, we got a quad camera setup with a 108 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 5 megapixel macro camera, and a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera. And then for video, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, despite having a max recording quality of 1080p in the front camera, it can record 4K videos in the rear, so definitely great to see. And with the A73 5G, this phone can record 4K videos in the front and rear. So in general, both phones have great camera setups here, and overall, I feel like the features are pretty much the same. But if you do happen to want to record 4K videos in the selfie camera, maybe you're doing lots of vlogs, for example, and you want to get that higher resolution, then in that case, the A73 5G will have an advantage. But otherwise, when it comes to features, they're pretty much even. Now, to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Overall, for what it is, considering this is definitely more of a mid-range phone, I do think the photo quality here is really impressive. For the average user, for things people are typically using smartphone cameras for, it will get the job done no matter what. So if you're doing stuff like Instagram, sending photos to friends and family, using something like Snapchat where honestly you could use any phone for something like that, and then maybe taking like vacation photos or something for your own memories. No matter what, for any kind of typical daily use, the camera we're getting with this phone will get the job done just fine. That being said though, if you're coming from maybe an older flagship phone like a Samsung Galaxy S10 or maybe an older iPhone, comparing this phone to a phone like that is probably not the best choice, just because despite being really good for a mid-range phone, the photo quality here is definitely not flagship level. So if you're coming from an older higher end device and you're used to that level of quality, you might want to get something a bit higher end than this. So definitely keep that in mind. But again, for the average user, I do think the photo quality here is perfectly fine. And then here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G, and really same kind of thing. When it comes to which one is better between the two, I'll let you decide that for yourself. But overall, with the A73 5G, just like with the Moto G Stylus 5G, I do think the photo quality is really good for more of a mid-range phone, but when you compare it to an actual flagship phone, it's not going to be quite that good. So in general, if you're looking for an affordable phone that has a really nice camera, the A73 5G will also be a great choice. For the RAM and processor, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor. With the A73 5G, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 778G processor. When it comes to performance, they are definitely around the same kind of level. And for mid-range phones that are still definitely not flagship phones, I do think the performance is pretty impressive. That being said though, between the two, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G is the faster device here. So if you're really going to be on your phone a lot and you want the faster phone between the two, definitely keep this in mind. But it's not like you're going to get the Moto G Stylus 5G and have a bad experience because it's so slow. Again, the difference is really not that huge. So overall, if you are looking for a decently fast phone that's still more on the affordable side, either phone here will be a great choice. I ran a benchmark test on each phone here using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see, despite the difference not being insane, the A73 5G does come out a bit ahead. So again, if you want the faster phone between the two, definitely keep this in mind. But in general, the Moto G Stylus 5G for what it is plenty fast too. So performance wise for most people, either phone here will be perfectly fine. For the batteries, both phones have 5000 mAh batteries, with the Moto G Stylus 5G supporting 20W fast charging, and the A73 5G supporting 25. Now, honestly, with the Motorola, I don't know why they didn't just bump it up to 25, it's not that much of a difference. But regardless, charging speed with each phone, while being maybe a little different, with the A73 5G being a tiny bit faster, is pretty much going to be about the same. And I want to say the average person doesn't even have above a 20W fast charger anyway. So for most people, the difference could even be non-existent. But aside from the charging speed, with 5000 mAh batteries, you can expect to get great battery life from either phone. So definitely great there. For the software, both phones have Android 13, but when it comes to software support, keep in mind that in general with Motorola, although I am expecting this phone to eventually get Android 14 once it comes out, I don't know when that's going to be, or if it's even going to happen at all. Because for that matter, the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 originally came with Android 12, and I was expecting it to have Android 13 by now, but it doesn't, or at least mine doesn't. So yeah, when it comes to updates, Motorola is at least decent compared to like a carrier brand, but definitely not nearly as reliable as Samsung, because with the A73 5G, not only are we getting Android 13, despite it originally coming with Android 12, but with this phone you can also expect to get Android 14, 15, and 16, so definitely great software support. But again, at least both phones do have Android 13, which as of this recording is the latest version of Android, so if that's the main concern for you when it comes to the software and stuff like that, either phone here will be perfectly fine. When it comes to other features, both phones have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, keep in mind, you can do that with either phone no problem. But unfortunately, the A73 5G does not have a headphone jack, whereas the Moto G Stylus 5G does. So if you do want that feature, definitely keep this in mind. And then of course, as the name implies, the Moto G Stylus 5G does actually have a stylus. So if you want a stylus phone that's not the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, then when it comes to current phones, the Moto G Stylus 5G is really your only option. I guess if you count the TCL Stylus 5G that's been out for a little over a year now, then if you're in Metro, that's always an option. But honestly, I feel like the Moto G Stylus is better in pretty much every way, which I will be going over in a separate video. But in general, if you're looking for stuff for basic handwritten notes, or maybe you want to navigate through your display or play a game or something like that, the stylus on this phone does work perfectly fine. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, in general, if I had to choose between the two, I would personally go with the Moto G Stylus 5G for a few different reasons. First of all, there are really not that many significant differences between these two phones that I personally really care about. Yeah, the A73 5G is a tiny bit larger. The Super AMOLED Plus versus an IPS LCD is a slightly more fancy display technology, but in my experience, when you're actually using the phones non-stop all day, with the A73 5G, it might be like 5% better, and I feel like that difference is really not enough to justify choosing one phone over the other. I mean, if it is for you, then that could be a different story, but for me, I feel like the display experience overall is pretty much the same. Both are great, so you can't go wrong with either. The storage, again, with that situation, sure, this phone in my hand does have 256 gigabytes, and this other phone in my hand has 128, but depending on the version you actually get, this could be completely different. And when it comes to stuff like the camera, sure, the A73 5G has that slight advantage being able to record 4K videos in the front camera, but I feel like when it comes to overall features and photo quality, these phones are just so comparable that there's no real clear advantage either. And then when it comes to stuff like the battery and even the performance, it's really the same kind of thing. Yeah, the A73 5G is technically the faster device between the two, based on the benchmark scores at least, but honestly, when you're actually using the phones for things most people use smartphones for, you're not really gonna notice the difference that much. So with all that being said, back to why I would personally go with the Motorola over the Samsung. The main reason here is because with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this phone is officially launched in the US, and since I'm located in the US, the deals you can get with this phone here, when it comes to stuff like carriers for example, are going to be quite a bit better. So you could potentially get this phone for like $30. I'm pretty sure they actually have it at Cricket for that cheap. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G, since again this phone is not officially launched in the US, you will have to get it factory unlocked, and despite being over a year old right now, I don't know off the top of my head exactly how much it is, but last time I looked at the price, it wasn't really that impressive. And obviously, depending on where you're located, this could be different, so definitely check the prices in your area. But at least in the US, when it comes to the value you're actually getting for the money, the Moto G Stylus 5G is a much better choice. In addition to this, again, this phone does have a stylus, which if you don't want to spend $1,400 on a phone, but you want to get a phone released in 2023 that has a stylus, then this is really the only choice I know of, except for the 4G version of this phone, which is basically the same thing but worse. And then again, the TCL Stylus 5G, which if you're not on Metro or T-Mobile, you can't even use it. So in general, in most situations, although the A73 5G has a better display, slightly better performance, and better software support, I still feel like if you really want to maximize the value you're actually getting for the money, the Moto G Stylus 5G will be the better choice. But this concludes my comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 and the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalibis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.